Friends, thank you for joining us this afternoon as we come to recognize a deeply special life. As we come to recognize and to give thanks for the gift of a life, of a person who touched the lives of so many, in so many different ways, a child of Cleveland, and in many ways a person of the world, a person who throughout and to the very end never ran out of love. Jack Davidson. It is at a moment such as this that the psalmist, the biblical poet, said, Eisa einai el heharim, me'ain yavo ezri. I cast my eyes onto the mountains. Where shall my help come from? And the response that the poet offered is Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. My only support could possibly come from the source of life, creator of heaven and earth. And we say to Jack today, Al yiten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. The source of life will not suffer your foot to be moved. The source of light that keeps you will not slumber. Behold, the source of life that keeps Israel neither sleeps nor slumbers. God is your shade now upon your right hand. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. God will keep you from all evil. The source of life and the chain of life will keep your soul. You are now in the hands of the source of life, who shall guard your going out and your coming in from this time and forever. We are going to read the 23rd Psalm, and we're going to read it the way Jack knew it. And so we're going to read it the way it appears in the Union Prayer Book. And I'm going to invite you to please join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our sages taught, God, source of life, what are we that you take knowledge of us? Children of humanity, that you take account of us. We are like unto vanity. Our days are as a shadow that passes away. In the morning we flourish. In the evening we are cut down, we are withered. You turn us to contrition and you say, Return, children of humanity. Oh, that we were wise, that we would consider our end. For when we go to eternity, we carry nothing with us. Our glory does not descend after us. It is love. It is memory. It is legacy that remains in those whom we have loved, and none of those who remember and who trust and who love are ever fully forsaken. We will have the honor and the blessing of hearing from a number of members of the family at this time, and I am going to call them in order to speak with us and to share with us their comments about their father and their grandfather. We're going to start with Jack's daughter, Dr. Elizabeth Roter.
Well, I have so much I could say, of course, but so little time. But my father taught me so many things throughout my life. He taught me how to play chess. We used to play chess a lot when I was young. He taught me how to play mumbledy-peg, which is a skill that I don't think anybody knows anymore, or even what people know what it is anymore. He also taught me how to play the ukulele, which is a foundation for me learning how to play the guitar. He encouraged me to open up a bank account when I was just 8 years old. He taught me good financial habits from the beginning. He would actually give us money whenever the time came to earn interest. This is when checking or savings accounts they actually earned interest that wasn't negligible. And if I earned interest that was less than $1, he gave me $1. After that, he would match the amount of interest that we got. It really encouraged me to return my library books on time so that I didn't have to pay fines and I had more money to put in the bank. He also co-signed for me to get my first credit card when I was in college. Had a whopping credit limit of $200, but it helped build my credit history. And he taught me how to manage my finances, which is something that served me well in life. We went on a lot of family vacations together, and they weren't anything fancy, but they were so special. Most of the time what we did is we would get in the car and we would drive. We drove to visit relatives. We drove to historic places. We saw museums. They were just lovely, and time that we spent together as a family. We also took 2 trips to Israel as a family, once when I was 10 years old and then once when I was 26. And it was a very different standpoint, of course, when I was a child with my parents and when I was an adult. And I was so glad to have vacation time as an adult with my family. I moved back home for a period of time before I started medical school, since I had no idea where I was going and couldn't afford a month-to-month lease, and my parents welcomed me back with open arms. And once again, I got to spend time with them as an adult and got to know them in a totally different way, and that's time that is so precious to me. When I was living at home, I would go for walks most evenings with my dad. And we always had family Shabbat. When I started having children, that, of course, was such a highlight in his life. He was always so supportive of everything his grandchildren did. He was their biggest fan, he and my mom. He always went to my son Samuel's plays. He went to my daughter's cross-country and track meets, even when the weather wasn't always so nice. And he went to the band concerts on the band field, and, well, not the football field, but he was always there. And once again, even when the weather was not so nice. When they all were in college, when I would talk to my dad or when I would go see him, when we would get together, he would always ask about them first. Then he'd ask about me. But that's okay. That's the way it should be. He was such a supportive father and grandfather. And family was so important to him, and that in turn made it important to us as well. And one of the big things really is with my dad was just the importance of his family. Thank you.
Benjamin Rother, may I call you up?
Honestly, I don't know where to even start when describing Zadie, much less with respect to all the memories I have that include him. He was such a happy-go-lucky person who rarely made any situation about him, in the sense that he would always do what was best for anyone he ever met, he ever knew or came into contact with. He was always there for people. Whether if it was for something good or for something bad or not so good. I loved when he and I would talk over the phone over the years about many different things, even as I got insanely busy with college and more recently grad school in Illinois. He would constantly support me, give me really helpful advice, along with Bobby, encourage me to be my best self even when times were really tough and have been really tough. And he was always unconditionally and unequivocally proud of me. I could definitely speak for others with this, since I would hear and see him acting very similarly to Leah and Sammy, Zoe and Graham, and my mom. I really enjoyed all of the times he and my family would go on trips to Mitchell's or East Coast every now and again, or to brunch. I enjoyed when we went to see Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot. I enjoyed talking with him about many different things during family get-togethers, whether it be about Judaism, Israel, or politics. Well, when we actually agreed on stuff. And I enjoyed seeing, seeing him when he came to witness events I either participated in or were just milestones. Some examples being my bar mitzvah, my confirmation, my high school graduation. Football games were performed with other marching band geeks, so to speak, birthdays, and every other instance that I can't remember right now. I also remember him, yes, I guess I'm being contradictory right now. I also remember him really enjoy whenever any one of us grandchildren would play something for him on an instrument, or sing, or he would always enjoy when he would sing, or when people would sing something for him. He'd always say how proud and talented we were, which definitely felt empowering to me, at least, since I'm not someone who can just speak, present, or perform spontaneously. I will also never forget Zadie's deep affection for cats, especially ones like Ella, Zichro Na Livracha, Pikachu, Zichro No Livracha, and Toby. They would always greet him at the door and then sit on his lap, purring like electric motors. He was also really interested in always seeing the different cats and kittens my mom would foster for, time and time again. I wish I could remember the times when we were together with Grandma Marge, but unfortunately biology and nature had other ideas for me. I know these were memories mostly involving me, but I assume others have had similar experiences. Going on to a different perspective on the timing of all of this, So last week I was struggling through finals since Northwestern is unfortunately on a quarter system, and I was done by Wednesday evening. And even though I had to still prepare for a presentation at the American Physical Society's annual March meeting, I knew I could be at least somewhat cheerful, knowing that Purim, a very joyous holiday, was happening, as well as just being done with finals and like a 3 really grueling months of grad school. But when I found out that morning at around 11:30 Central about Zadie's passing, I was immediately insanely devastated, since someone who had such a prominent influence on my life was now gone on what was supposed to be a very celebratory day. For me, even though it may have just been a very dark coincidence, it is one dark coincidence that will inevitably live on for every Purim for the rest of my life. On the other hand, I'm sure that Zadie would like me doing what I do best and making him proud, as opposed to just sitting, even if he's not physically with me or anyone else anymore. I guess my one takeaway from all of this is that, as cliche as this sounds and is, even when times are brutal and the world goes by so fast, savor the moments you have with other people, especially relatives, and tell them how important you are to them, as it's just the snap of a finger away from not having someone so meaningful to you in your life anymore. The last memory I'd like to discuss before I adjourn is actually on me right now. The suit jacket I'm wearing and the pants that I'm wearing were actually a gift from him when I was starting to interview for engineering internships while I was an undergrad. I thought I had the right attire for a business formal interview, but it didn't matter to him. He went all out, and he went out of his way to help me choose an entire new wardrobe of business formal attire. And it's been helpful for interviews, but also it's been helpful for interviews. It also helped yesterday when I presented in Chicago, and obviously I'm wearing some of what he helped me pick today. Zadie, if you hear me, know that I love you so much, and that I appreciate everything that you have done to help me, as well as others. I appreciate everything that you've done, to help me, as well as others, become successful and the people we are today. You definitely exemplify a mensch. Say hi to Grandma Marge for me if you can. Baruch Dayan ha'emet ve'zichrono livracha.
Thank you for this, Benjamin. Samuel, may I please call you up? Samuel Rota.
Oh, wow. So I had a list of things that I wanted to say, and of course, my mother and my brother already said all of those, and as Zadie would say, great minds think alike. So I'm just going to have to improvise, and he was an actor. He loved theater, so this would be right up his alley. So some of the points that I wanted to say was we all shared such a deep connection, a very special connection with our grandfather. And he was so interested in everything that we had to do, everything. And he was our biggest supporters. And he was so proud of all of our accomplishments. Every time I would give him a call, he would be so incredibly excited to hear everything that's been going on. And of course, he would always ask me about my sister, my brother, and my cousins, and my mother, and my uncle. He wanted to hear about everything. He even wanted to hear about the cats. And, I mean, the cats rivaled us with our love towards him. So it was always really special to hear how interested he was. And he would always come to my plays, to Leah's meets, to Ben's. He would love to hear like Ben's new findings, new papers, and he would. He was just all of our biggest supporters, and I've gotten to, especially in the past couple of years during the pandemic, I got to know him a lot more in ways that I haven't before. With me being older and being able to understand and to be able to relate more to him. I was his personal chaperone over the pandemic, and we spent a lot of time together, and that's when I got to know more about him. He was always so focused on knowing about us and and being there for us that it took a long time for me to actually learn who he was. It wasn't until very recently that I learned he was a businessman and other interests. I mean, I've always known he's loved football and all of that, but it never occurred to me like how invested he was, and I would hear stories about him from the Army, and how stories from when my mother and my uncle were children. It really, it was so special, and I will cherish those moments forever. And on behalf of my family, I'm sure that we all appreciate and we all will cherish the time we've spent with him.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Samuel. I'd like to now call up Graham Davidson. Graham, is this...
Thank you all so much for... Thank you all so much for coming. Got my teacher voice on right now. For many years, Zadie was always our biggest supporter. That's the biggest thing that, I'm sure you all are getting taken away from the grandchildren. So I'd like to just share one story for me that kind of sums that all up. One of my birthday gifts every single year for 5, 6 years or so when I was younger, Zadie would always pay for a week of my soccer camp. Go from like 9 to 1 p.m., while I'd work on my skills and whatever, he'd come and pick me up afterwards, and I'd spend the rest of the day with him. And I always really appreciated that time. Whether it was swimming or getting ice cream at Mitchell's, just spending time with him. But what stuck out the most to me was all these movies and great classics he would share with me. I associate so many classic films, the Star Wars, the original trilogy, Indiana Jones, and of course, much to my parents' dismay, but to the joy of 11-year-old me, my first rated R movie, Inglourious Bastards, where I got to watch some very visceral images at a young age. I thought it was awesome. My parents, not so much. But what stuck out to me the most was the movie The Princess Bride. A cult classic. As a kid, I loved the action, the jokes, the suspense, covered my eyes during all the kissing scenes, just like the character in it did as well. But after his passing, that movie has a new kind of place in my heart. When I first heard of the news on Thursday, didn't really know kind of what to do or how to process my feelings. And the first thing I wanted to do was to do something that made me think of my Zadie. So I watched The Princess Bride again. And again, at the time, it never stuck with me, but the movie, watching, grandfather spending time with his grandson, that whole arc, and the final ending of the movie where, the grandfather tells his grandson that he loves him in the way of, in The Princess Bride. The kid asks his grandfather, can you come back one more time? And those of you who know the movie know the line. He says, as you wish, which is the way, they said I love you in that movie. So Grandpa, Zadie, for everything, Jack, thank you so much for all the time. Thank you so much for the love and support. It means the world to all of us.
Thank you. we have one more grandchild to hear from before we hear from the son of Jack. Zoe, may I ask you up?
Thank you. Graham, that was very beautiful. Oh, yeah, Graham, that was very beautiful. I'm very moved by that as well. I think you're all sensing a theme. Zadie was our biggest fan, our biggest supporter. We've all said it. He was at every event. For me, that showed up as sitting in the cold at the ice rink, watching my skating competitions, coming to my various performances and shows. But something that I'll also always be grateful for, that Zadie helped to introduce to me was just that love of theater. My first memory of being at a show, my first memory of theater was going to see Oliver at Playhouse Square with him and Grandma Marge, and I've been hooked ever since. Even today, as I drove into town, my playlist was Fiddler on the Roof and Rodgers and Hammerstein, and it was all in his honor. Like my brother said, I have so many wonderful memories of watching movies with Zadie and watching Indiana Jones, watching The Princess Bride. I also consider that my favorite movie when asked. But something that he made special for us is that he would set aside times where we could have lunch and work our way through his movie musical collection, which was wonderful. One particular memory that is popping out to me is I think this was the last time that Zadie saw me perform. It was my senior year of college, and we somehow convinced him and my other set of grandparents and Bobby to drive 4.5 hours to see me perform in Pennsylvania, which I know was not a comfortable journey, but he came because he knew how important it was for me, and I'm just so incredibly grateful. The last thing I'll say, for those of you who don't know, I'm not the only Zoe in Zadie's life. When my parents told me that Zadie and Bobby were getting a dog and that its name was going to be Zoe, I thought that was a little strange. But talking to Zadie and Bobby about it, it is one of the greatest compliments of my life to share a name with that little dog. So thank you all for coming, and yes, just thank you.
I think you would agree that there's something remarkable about hearing from family members and grandchildren about the experience of a Zadie, the experience of a grandfather, a loving grandfather, a supportive grandfather, and a grandfather who offered so much. And how wonderful it is to have these remarks launched really by his daughter. And now I would like to call up Jack's son, Colin Davidson, to please share a few words with us.
So it's sometimes a little bit hard to go last. People say all the things. The fortunate thing is that I've got 56 years on most of them, and I could dig back a little deeper. The themes that you heard today, as the rabbi said, about support and caring, that didn't start with the kids. And what I wanted to talk to you about today was about the profound way in which he supported me growing up. And looking back at it, there's really 3 lessons that he imparted to me that really significantly, impacted the trajectory of my life. So, lesson 1. Lesson 1. Learning removes limits. After I moved to Beechwood in 5th grade, I started playing soccer. Wishing to help me succeed, my dad signed up to coach his awkward kid in a game that he knew absolutely nothing about. And because the internet was still decades away, he had to do research the old way: libraries, bookstores, and then he coached what he read. Work hard, effective drills, winning game strategy. And when a professional soccer team started playing in Cleveland, we got season tickets. And he learned from the best. And it all worked out. Dad led each of one of my teams to a championship every summer he coached. I went on to play and play and play and play until I could no longer run again in my 30s. Lesson 2. Strengths overcome challenges. I'm an introvert. And thanks to Dad, most people, especially at work, have no clue. As an awkward high schooler, large groups, social settings, new people, those are all things that I avoided. Dad convinced me, there you go, Dad convinced me that it would be advantageous to learn how to compensate. And the best way to do that, he thought, was to focus on what I was good at and then practice again and again and again and again in uncomfortable situations. So he somehow thought that being a high school newspaper reporter would be the perfect vehicle for that. He said that my curiosity and my writing skills would provide me enough protection, to be a reporter. And it all worked out. I interviewed all sorts of interesting people: politicians, police, an astronaut. I became an editor. I won a few awards. And while it is not my favorite thing to do, I will talk to strangers today. Lesson number 3. Be principled, yet humble enough to change. Culture and tradition were a big deal for my dad. For him, a physical manifestation of Jewish culture and family tradition was his grandmother's, my great-grandmother Rose's, engagement ring. Dad's long-stated desire was to pass this ring to me when I was ready to marry a nice Jewish girl. Well, I had him fall in love with Emily, who just so happens ain't Jewish. After awkward conversation, Dad recognized that Emily meant a lot more to our collective future and made some adjustments. He not only honored us with the ring, but he also wholeheartedly welcomed Emily and her entire family into ours. And it all worked out. Great Rose's memory lives on in Zoe's middle name, and the in-law friendship continues with Bobby. Thanks, Dad. I love you, and I'll miss you.
Thank you. Thank you for this. I will just add a few words. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jack for a number of years now, and experiencing Jack and his goodness and his rationality and his kindness and his ability to not only be there at the moment, but especially be there at the moment and speak of others, especially members of his family. Jack was interested in so much and knew about so much. About politics, about football, about music, about theater, about the world, and about people. Jack loved people, and he loved helping people, mentoring people, whether it was at work or elsewhere, volunteering, helping others, and making a difference. And I will say to you today that in the last chapter of his life, he also found Bobby, and that Bobby and Jack offered love and comfort and well-being to each other. And let me very briefly and succinctly say that this relationship and the love between Jack and Bobby lengthened Jack's life and created for Jack the home that he loved and that he wanted for himself and for Bobby. And it was remarkable to see and to experience. Thank you all. We say, out of the depths, we call unto you, source of life. In your hands are the souls of the living and the spirits of all flesh. Your loving kindness is never withdrawn from us, but ever abides with us in life and in death. You have laid upon us a heavy burden. May you also, in your mercy, give us the strength to bear it. Guide and sustain us, lest we stray from your paths. Give us the strength of faith to keep us from murmuring and from being cynical with regard to life, to kindness, and to love. Grant us, we pray, the understanding that will enable us to recognize that our wounds are capable of healing, that life must prevail, for you are life itself. At this time, I'm going to ask you to please rise for the El Maleh Rachamim. El Maleh Rachamim, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, לנשמת ינקל יעקב בן אהרון ורות שהלך לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. O source of life, our God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant perfect rest unto the soul of Jack Harold Davidson, who has departed from this world. Source of life and mercy, bring Jack into your presence, and let his soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. You, God, are his possession. May his repose forever be peace. And let us together say, Amen. You may be seated.
I'd like to ask anyone who is going to be a pallbearer if they would kindly step forward at this time. Elders, I'm just going to maybe step off to the side. Everyone else would rise, please. someone ask you to step directly to your car,
when you're leaving the building.
if any of you are driving with us to the cemetery, I remind you, you must manually turn on your headlights because in daytime they will not come on. So you can step to your cars either through the front or rear of the chapel as you wish.
Yes, I do.